Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Julie. I do everything from book reviews to tarot, and if you're returning, I'm so glad I haven't scared you off. Now today we're going to be talking about The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And possibly as importantly, I want to discuss Reid's writing style and why I love it so much. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I'm going to be abbreviating that to Seven Husbands from now on, follows the journey of reporter Monique Grant as she gets the opportunity of a lifetime to interview the reclusive starlet Evelyn Hugo, who was the bombshell of the 50s and 60s and had a successful acting career even into the 80s. Monique is 35, but in a lot of ways she feels like her life hasn't even started yet. She, by a lot of accounts, and it's reinforced to her that she is a small-times reporter, and she's unsure how Evelyn Hugo even heard of her, and why she wants Monique in particular to write her story. While Monique starts out the novel kind of preoccupied with her own life struggles and this question of why me, why did Evelyn choose me, Reid uses this format of an interview as a way to tell some chapters from Monique's point of view and other chapters that delve in more into Evelyn's life from Evelyn's point of view. And the chapters from Monique's point of view are in the present tense, while Evelyn's point of view, as she's discussing her life previous to this point, is in the past tense. I have a pretty wild theory about past and present tense writing and how it works in this story, so you might want to buckle up for that. Basically, how I feel about it is, I think in a lot of ways Monique acts as a foil to Evelyn. Evelyn is accomplished, scrappy and very confident in all that she does, and she paid a high price for that. Whereas Monique is still, in a lot of ways starting out in her career. She's very unsure of herself. And I think the past tense writing speaks to her experience, wealth of knowledge, whereas the present tense writing speaks to Monique's inability to kind of get out of her own head sometimes and, really learn to value herself and her voice as a writer. And I'm going to be honest with you, I enjoyed Evelyn's story quite a bit more than I enjoyed Monique's, and I feel bad saying it, but I just thought there was more interesting stuff going on with Evelyn. And her story in a lot of ways reminds me of Ingrid Bergman. If you haven't seen Be Kind Rewind's video on that actual real-life starlet, check it out. It's very good. I'll link it in the description. But essentially, Evelyn Hugo was born Evelyn Herrera in Hell's Kitchen in New York to Cuban immigrants. And she, in order to achieve her fame, went through the studio system, which back in the day usually made you change your name and your appearance, which what happened to her. She had to dye her hair blonde, obviously changed her name to Evelyn Hugo, and her entire backstory was erased and rewritten for her to match what Hollywood would consider profitable back then. And although this isn't much of a loss for her, you could say, she doesn't really have many qualms about disconnecting from her family back home. I do think it's pretty sad. She no longer, gets the opportunity to speak Spanish. She has to essentially reinvent herself. And this book is really a question of, are you willing to go that extra mile for what's important to you in life? Are you willing to risk it all? Are you willing to truly go after what you want and potentially pay the price for it? With Evelyn's story starting really in the 50s, I think this book does a really good job of illustrating how she was able to, it's going to sound bad, but she was able to use her marriages to kind of bolster her name and gain her self-recognition before she could be recognized for her true talent in Hollywood. And some people might say that that was morally dubious of her, but what you have to understand, and what I think this book does illustrate from a historical retrospective, is how women were so pigeonholed that really their only option was marriage to advance themselves. And it's funny because one of Evelyn's breakout roles is in Little Women, and I don't think that's by accident, because that's kind of the whole quandary in Little Women itself, is marriage all there is? This book, though, is about so much more than Evelyn's marriages and her advancing in her own career. It's about her discovering herself and who she truly is and what she wants out of life. I really don't want to spoil it, because if I go any further into detail about what that means, I think I'll have a massive spoiler. But this whole book, there's a struggle to answer the question you know, are you willing to go after what matters most to you in life? And what does matter most to you? These are important questions you have to ask yourself. And this exists on both ends for Monique and for Evelyn. Through Evelyn, Monique learns about confidence and knowing your value and knowing your worth, and really sticking to that, because you are worthy of everything you want in this life. I personally believe that too. And a lot of times you just have to do what you can, and you have to look out for yourself. Yes, look out for others. It is important to be kind and compassionate, but you always have to remember yourself, because who else will look after you better than you is essentially one of the lessons in this book. But I think too, there's a focus on found family and finding a support system in friends and loved ones that might not necessarily be blood relations. And I think that is an important theme here that you don't always see explored a lot, you know. On to the writing. First and foremost, let me say, I appreciate how this book shows and doesn't tell you things. You know, we learn that Evelyn is scrappy through her actions. Yes, we later have characters tell us that she's scrappy and resourceful, but we are shown how that is the case through her own actions in life, usually first. And I appreciate that, because there is a growing problem in this world about telling and not showing, and I appreciate Reid's ability to give us concrete examples. I always love that. But also, I want to get into a little bit of a comparison quickly between this book and Daisy Jones and the Six. Now, I did a review on that. I will put a card up because I'm always plugging my other stuff. Wow. Both of these books were written by Reid, and they both take the form of an interview. In Daisy Jones and the Six, it's kind of like a behind-the-scenes band interview where you know, they're asked questions and they detail their own lives to the interviewer. And in this book too, we get Evelyn's life through her own words. There's no like omniscient narrator. It's Evelyn herself explaining her life to Monique. And I think that writing style is very cool. And I think it's very rife for a lot of tinfoil hat theories. One of my bigger theories in Daisy Jones and the Six was that, I'm not going to get into spoilers for them, don't worry, but I feel like the band members of the Six and Daisy Jones herself weren't always entirely truthful with the interviewer based on who the interviewer was. And if you've read that book, I think you might know what I'm talking about. I'm speaking specifically to the relationship between Daisy and Billy. And I'm wondering if, because of who the interviewer was, they weren't entirely forthcoming about their relationship. And that format that Reid chooses to write in really activates the mind, I think. And that whole interview style, you wonder if you're getting the full picture. And even in Seven Husbands, right? You know, Evelyn's whole pretext to Monique is that she's giving her the full story, nothing but the truth, all of her lies laid bare, all of her secrets laid bare. And even then, knowing how resourceful and scrappy Evelyn is, you have to wonder, like, is she telling the full truth about her life? I do think a lot of it is true. I mean, I don't think she shies away from more of the darker aspects. But you gotta wonder, like, is there more to the story? Because everyone else who could refute these claims, everyone else who was involved in her life, has since passed away. So I'm left wondering of, like, she says certain things happened one way, but she could be lying about all this, you know? And again, there has to be some benefit of the doubt. I understand that. And I don't know if Reid essentially meant you to question everything that you're reading about these people. But the format of these two books really does invite those questions, and I appreciate that, because I love discussion. What can I say? Speaking of which, if you want to discuss these books, do so in the comments. Let me get the self-promo stuff out of the way now. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe while we're talking about discussion. And make sure to turn on the bell notification, because so you get notified when I put out new videos. I think in both books, Reid has a masterclass essentially in showing nuanced characters. None of her characters in the two books that I've read have been wholly good or wholly bad. They've all done morally dubious things to achieve their goals. They all have done great things for other people and helped other people in various ways. And in Seven Husbands too, I think this is illustrated even more clearly, sorry for the hiccup, illustrated even more clearly because through learning about Evelyn's story, Monique grows in her own self-confidence and learns to stand up to her bosses and figure out her own true worth, as I said. So even in learning about the darker aspects of things, Monique is able to find lessons to be learned. And I think there is something to be said for all of that. I appreciate that in both books, Reid is able to play with form and tense and really display things in a kind of unconventional manner. I mean, I know that there are books out there that do this more overtly in playing with the actual structure of the text, making different shapes out of it. But I mean in this sense that I think the way that she does it speaks to a larger theme, and I think it just feeds the artwork even more. I mean, I could honestly talk about Seven Husbands all day. There's so much to discuss. Without spoiling anything, I'll tell you that it is LGBTQ-friendly, and it does a good job in representing that aspect of things. Sexuality is greatly explored in this book, and it is treated with respect and care and complexity, which you don't always find. So I will say that too. But I think that's going to be where I wrap things up for today, and I'm going to tell you to go read it. I'm giving it a 10 out of 10, perfect score. Are there things I didn't like? Yeah, sure, but honestly, there's so much more to be gotten out of this book than just a couple negative things. They honestly are greatly overshadowed by the lessons here. I felt inspired by Evelyn Hugo. I felt inspired by Monique in some ways. I felt like I saw myself in Monique in my own lack of confidence with certain things. I related to these characters. I love these characters, and I hope you love them too. I mean, everyone and their mother is talking about this book, and I think that's for good reason. If you're still here, wow, thank you so much. You might be interested in some of my other content I have on Patreon, and links to my other platforms will be below. And yeah, final goodbye.